Brought to you by concordiatheology.org, bringing you resources that support the vigorous life of the mind in service of the gospel of Christ.
Welcome to Lectionary Kickstart. We're sparking your thoughts for Sunday as you plan your sermon or teaching lesson. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordolo, here with Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Nafsker. They're both professors of homiletics here at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. You can hear all about us in our introductory episode, but trust me, they are pretty good preachers. All right, let's get started. Peter, where are we in the church year?
This is the fourth Sunday of Easter as we continue to celebrate Jesus' resurrection from the dead and the promise that we too rise in him.
And what are the texts for this week, David?
The texts are Acts 20, Revelation 7, John 10, and Psalm 23.
Good Shepherd Sunday.
I love Psalm 23.
Yeah?
Yeah, me too.
Why do you love it?
It's just so comforting. It is so comforting.
And what are the texts for this week, David?
Acts 20, Revelation 7, John 10, and Psalm 23.
As always, I ask each of you to tell me which text you would choose to preach about. To determine who goes first, so this week's readings are all about sheep and shepherds. Have you ever been around an actual live sheep?
Yes, I actually lifted one up. They are heavy. They are so heavy. If I took one home, I would not be rejoicing, carrying. I'd be saying, get this thing off my shoulders. It's so heavy.
Why were you lifting sheep?
Because I didn't know anything about sheep, and the person was talking to me about them, and then pick it up. I'm
Nice.
like, man, this
Nice.
is heavy.
I love it. What about you, Peter?
I've never picked up a sheep, so David probably wins this one. I've been around them, but I've never picked one up. So,
When were you around sheep?
I was around sheep when we were in Ireland, actually.
Oh, wow.
And we saw lots of little sheep everywhere, and they were right up next to the road. You drive right past them.
Oh, I just love it.
Well, I've never been around live sheep. No sheep experience. So, Peter, you win because you didn't lift up the sheep.
Okay.
You get to go first.
All right. Well, I am, through this season of Easter, as we've talked about the last couple of weeks, preaching a sermon, or I would suggest preaching a sermon on Revelation. The epistle readings are all from the book of Revelation. They all have a variety of images that I think you could explore and meditate on. Each image, we've talked about the last couple of weeks, is drawn from the text. Just to remind myself and everyone what we're talking about here, Revelation is this kind of literature where it's image-rich, it's evocative, it's apocalyptic, which is to say that it conceals things even as it reveals things. And so we don't look at Revelation like it's a snapshot or a photograph like we would more with the gospel readings. This is more artistic, more like a stained glass window. And so we're selecting images out of this revelation of St. John to meditate on each week.
What a great beginning to your sermon. If you're talking about Revelation, that just clears up a lot of confusion for those of us in the pew.
Yeah, the difference between looking through a clear glass window and a stained glass window.
Right.
Yeah.
Clear glass window, you see what's outside. It's very clear. Something's happening. You can describe it. Stained glass window, a lot different.
It's not a photograph.
Right.
Like when you read Revelation, it's not a narrative like the gospel. I can't expect to see golden streets in heaven, and there's not only 144,000 people in heaven. All this, things that you can take the wrong way, and many of us do.
Well, and that's kind of the idea here, is that you've got the Revelations in the lectionary, and if you can help your people read the book and understand what the book is by taking it head on through these sermons. So I'm sticking with it, Revelation for the season of Easter. And so the last couple weeks we looked at the keys and we looked at the choir. And today I'm going to suggest, why don't you read Revelation 7, verse 9, Jessica, to get us started.
After this I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all the tribes and peoples and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robes with palm branches in their hands. I love it. That's the greatest.
What do you love about it?
Everybody. All those people, not just people like me, all of God's people. How exciting is that? Right. That kind of opens the door to what God has done for us and what the new creation will be like.
Well, it captures the scope of in the season of Easter, the scope of the impact of the resurrection of Jesus. It goes to all people.
Right.
So the word, the image that I'm using each week has a word associated with it. So this week I would say the crowd.
Oh, the crowd. Okay.
The crowd. And so I'd maybe start by helping people think about crowds that they've been in. And so I was curious for the two of you, what's the biggest crowd you've ever been in, do you think?
My husband and I went to Scotland one year for New Year's. Edinburgh was so packed. They were singing and dancing. It was pretty fun, but it was a big, big crowd.
Yeah, big crowds. There's some people who are crowd people who love the energy of a big crowd. There's some people who run from crowds and don't like it. There's some crowds that are joyful, like the one you just described. There's some crowds that are stinky. I think about a crowded gym with a bunch of middle schoolers. There's all sorts of different crowds. But, you think about crowds. Well, I would want to take a deep and extensive and multifaceted look at this crowd. Okay, so John sees a crowd. And I think the sermon would, I'm not sure if I would want to explore all these questions in a sermon or choose one of them. So I don't have everything all worked out. But there are some basic questions that I think you could ask in a sermon about this crowd. Whether you ask them explicitly as questions or you use this as a way to describe the crowd, you can go a couple different ways. So the questions I would ask, who is in this crowd? You get this huge crowd. And that picks up on the verse that you just read. People from every nation, all tribes, peoples, languages. This is a diverse crowd. And diversity in a beautiful sense. So one question to ask, who is in this crowd? Another question to ask would be, well, where did this crowd come from? Okay, and this is where I would lean into verse 14. Would you read verse 14, Jessica?
I said to him, "Sir, you know." And he said to me, "These are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb."
Okay, that word tribulation to me stood out. And commentaries will point you back to things like Daniel chapter 12 and Matthew, the eschatological discourse, Jesus' words about tribulation. I don't think I would necessarily go into those connections. I think I would read tribulation as just life. And so, I think about life, and oftentimes, we all have different things we're going through, right? That life and sometimes feels like one long tribulation. That there's trials, there's struggles. It's just plain hard. And I think you would get some resonance with your members of your congregation just to name that. That life is tribulation in a lot of ways. And we shouldn't be surprised by that. We don't have to enjoy it, and we certainly don't relish it, and we don't want to get out of it, but it's what we should kind of expect. So I'd want to name that, especially on behalf of the people who are going through tribulation, to acknowledge that. But the thing is, this image, people who have come out of the tribulation, right?
Yeah.
And so you don't dwell too long there, because John has seen people who've come out of it. And I would think what a great encouragement for people who are in the thick of some sort of tribulation, that there is an end, that John has seen it. This resurrected Jesus is going to come back and end the tribulation, whatever that is. And so that would be a real comfort, I would think. I don't know. What do you guys think? When you hear the word tribulation in this context, what other synonyms
I
come
think
to mind?
Trials and tribulations, for some reason, that rings a bell. Trials and tribulations, afflictions.
Sufferings. Hardships, difficulties. I think those are words we might use more often than tribulation. I probably have not used tribulation in conversations with my friends who are dealing with something bad.
Okay. So maybe you'd want to just get at the issue behind it, and not, I guess, kind of like we did earlier, the word maybe isn't the most
Talk about
necessary.
the word. Just tell us what it means. Just remind us. It's just an older kind of word that maybe, especially the younger people, might not. I don't think my kids would know what tribulation is. Just tell us. Give us those synonyms when you're preaching.
Okay. So one way to get at it would be to ask where they come from, and tribulations, struggles, afflictions, this kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
but isn't it interesting? You have this amazing vision of all of these people, and it isn't like where they've come from. Well, they've come from the mighty kingdoms, the victorious kingdoms.
Yeah.
These are the they've come out of tribulation.
You think about all the nations, all the tribes. You think of the Olympics, right? People coming from every different nation, but they're coming wearing their nation's flag and that kind of stuff.
And they're the best.
And they're the best.
They're the best.
And here is the elder says to John, these are the ones coming not out of all these different nations that he mentioned earlier, but they're all, wherever they're from, are coming out of tribulation.
Right.
And so it shows how the unified human experience in a fallen world is one of difficulty and struggle. And so what unites these people in some ways, among other things, is what they've come out of.
This common suffering
Yeah.
that they've been brought through.
And you've got members who probably feel very alone in their suffering. And so to help them
Right.
see the
Right.
common, not to diminish the suffering they're in, but to help them see they're not alone in it. A third question you might ask would be, well, why are they here in this crowd? What got them here? And that's where you could use some language from verse 14 again. Well, they've been washed by the blood of the Lamb. They have a common background, the tribulation, and they also have a common, a common Savior, a common promise, a common cleansing and washing. And of course, baptism here is kind of an obvious connection you could make, but it would certainly be the focus on the one who makes a promise to them in baptism, the one who is seated on the throne, the Lamb, and that's the connection, I guess, to Good Shepherd Sunday with the Lamb in the text. A fourth question: well, what are they like here? What is this crowd like? And this gets to the language in verses 16 and 17. Would you read that, Jessica?
They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb in the midst of the throne will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes.
Of course, to me, the part of that stands out every time is God will wipe away every tear from their eyes.
I love that.
Yeah. Why do you say that?
Well, I just love it because we have had such a huge, grand vision, multitudes of people, many nations, many tribes, a great tribulation, all of that, and then all of a sudden we're looking at a tear. Who notices a tear? And yet God does, right? And he wipes them away. I just love that.
One final question, and that would be, well, what difference does this make? The image of this crowd, what difference does it make in our lives here today? And so you see this crowd, Jessica. You've been meditating on this text with us for a little while now this afternoon. What difference does this make to you?
Two things. First of all, that God's people don't all look like me because they're from every tribe and race and nation. And so sometimes I think it's just me and God and the people who think how I think. But it's everyone who has faith in Christ. In all times, too, not just all places. Think of throughout history, how many people are going to be in the new creation with us, right? Bigger than we can imagine. And so that kind of opens up what God has done, and it reminds me of how I should treat people and people who are not just the same as me, that they're going to be there too if Christ has made their robes white as well. So that's exciting, and it influences how I interact with people around me. And then secondly, God wiping away every tear from my eye. Like he knows about every tear. He knows about all of them, and he's going to wipe them away. I don't just sit with them when I'm there with him. They just stay there. He's going to wipe them away. So he notices them, he sees them, and he's going to get rid of them.
That's great. Those are two great things you could invite your congregation to notice about the difference this image, this crowd makes for their lives today.
That was fabulous. Thank you, Peter. David, what about you?
I'm going to go with Psalm 23. I remember, whenever I think of Psalm 23, I remember walking into this church. It was an evening Lenten service, and there was a woman who was already seated. The sun was going down, and she was sitting, and right by her was the stained glass window of, the Good Shepherd, Jesus carrying a lamb. And, I came walking down the aisle to go into the sacristy, and I said, it looks like you got your seat already. And she said, this is my seat. I said, really? She said, right by this stained glass window. And I said, well, that's a really beautiful window to choose. And she said, I used to sit here with my daughter in my arms. And she said, and I'd look at that window and I'd think about how Jesus was caring for little ones and I was caring for my daughter. And then she said, and now I sit under this window. My daughter no longer goes to church. She doesn't live with me anymore. And she said, and I think about how Jesus is carrying me. And what I loved about that reflection was the way in which Psalm 23 has been there throughout her life. And the psalm means different things to us at different points in our life. For me, I think I would just do a sermon where I walk through the psalm and make some observations. I want to know that God's love for me has not changed, right? That's kind of the...
So you can, I don't know where you're going to go with the sermon.
No.
But I can imagine even just as an exercise, wondering what this same familiar, comforting passage would mean to different people or different people in different situations in your congregation. And you can even, I imagine, organize a sermon around those different experiences that people have and how this psalm speaks to that context.
Yeah. I guess, Jessica, if you could read verses 1 through 3, that would be the first part.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake.
Okay, so the big teaching would be that our shepherd knows our needs. Because that's kind of what's happening, is the shepherd knows what the sheep need, and he's leading the sheep toward that. And so the sheep don't need to be concerned about it themselves. The shepherd is bringing them to it. And you've got the kind of the basic needs of food and water, right? But then you move beyond the basic needs to even deeper needs, and that is a soul that needs to be restored, right? And so when you think about God's relationship to us, his work in our life, he knows what we need not just at the surface level of material things, but he knows what we need spiritually. And he is at work, even as we speak, he's at work bringing us to the places where we will receive what we need.
Well, the leading, he leads me beside still waters. There's that trust there that, when somebody's leading you, you don't know exactly where you're going to go. And to have this kind of promise that the leading is good,
yeah,
it's gracious, I think that could be helpful to people who don't see where it's going and maybe aren't there yet.
Right, or not there yet, but to know that they're being led. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, Jessica, the next part would be verse 4 and 5.
Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil, and my cup overflows.
Yeah. So for me, the second major teaching, so our shepherd knows our needs, and the second would be our shepherd transforms our lives. And this middle portion of the psalm, right? You've got the valley of the shadow of death. You've got the change from he to thou, you are with me. So you've got that change, so it's much greater personal connection. And then I've always kind of thought to myself that there's a change from sheep to people, right? Because, you're sitting around a table now, and he's anointing your head with oil, and you're in the presence of enemies, and you have a cup that overflows. All of that, to me, looks more like a human thing, right? I mean, so we can obviously continue them to be sheep and say, well, he's just spreading provision for them, but the language to me evokes humanity, and so there's this transformation that happens, right? That when God is your shepherd, he's going to transform your lives. Now, there's a question I've always had. So Jessica, how do you read verse 5, you prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies.
I'm glad you asked. Because that's the part that I don't get. And I've always wondered what exactly that means. Like, are they supposed to be jealous because God's given me a good meal at the table?
So there's one way of one way of reading
nice.
it, kind of a triumphalist, well, I'm going to have my table spread in the presence of my enemies. That's one way of looking at it. And I don't know, I need to look at commentaries and stuff, but part of me wonders if maybe these are enemies who have become friends.
Right? I did this exercise with
with
a class a couple of years ago where we were we had some students on campus, and we were looking at how does the gospel affect the community.
Yeah.
And we read through this psalm. I just asked them to make observations with that lens. And one of the students said, he just kind of automatically said, well, the presence of my enemies, that means I'm having a meal with those I used to be enemies
right,
with.
Yes.
And he has brought us together. And I thought, I've never thought of that. But I think there's at least it's an interesting thought experiment, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah, it's a possibility that, in as much as he transforms us from sheep into people, he transforms our relationships from enmity into friendships. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
And it's comforting to know that even when my enemies are all present around me, he's still giving me food.
Right.
Like I can sit down at the table and still eat even though they're all there because he's still going to take care of me.
Right, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
He's taking care of you. He's anointing your head with oil. Your cup's overflowing. So either way, but that always is an odd statement, right? Yeah.
It is odd because it seems a little out of place to be kind of like the triumphal.
I know.
Kind of, hey, neener,
yeah.
kind of. But this is more, it's a complete transformation.
Yeah. And then the last line, verse 6.
Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Okay. So we've got our shepherd who knows our needs. Our shepherd transforms our lives. And then the last thing would be our shepherd brings us home in thankfulness. And so I love that, dwelling in the house of the Lord forever, but I really love that goodness and mercy shall follow. And if I remember correctly, that word is pursue, right? So goodness and mercy will pursue me all the days of my life. So not only is God leading me in front, but he's coming from behind, pursuing me with what? With goodness and mercy. So if God pursues me with goodness, my response to God would be thankfulness, right? Right, for the good things he brings into my life. But there are bad things in my life. There are bad things about me. And so God doesn't just pursue me with goodness, he pursues me with mercy. So that I have thankfulness again, but a different kind of thankfulness, right? A thankfulness that I am forgiven. And so you've just got this amazing vision of, I finally will be brought home. And when I'm brought home, the only thing I can do is thank God for the goodness that he's done for me and for pursuing me with mercy in times when I've gone astray. It's such a gorgeous psalm. And so that would be my goal, would be just walk through it. Nothing, remarkably new. We're just walking through the psalm, but we're hearing something comforting.
Yeah, and in the context of Easter, all of this flows out of from the one who is risen from the dead, who has defeated our greatest enemy. It's a psalm that never gets old.
Right.
That was great. Thank you, David. You guys had really good ones. This was great. I guess our listeners will have to preach 2 sermons. Well, that's all for today. We have free resources to guide your next step in planning at concordiatheology.org. Check it out. While you're there, you'll also find episodes of our other podcast, Tangible, Theology Learned and Lived. Twice a month, I get to talk with seminary professors about the ways that their understanding of God and faith is real in their everyday lives. The show is for anyone who wants to deepen their theology. Tell your congregation about it. It's called Tangible, Theology Learned and Lived. I just had a great conversation with Dr. Robert Kolb and Dr. Joel Okamoto. The episode is called Faith Alone. We really mean it. Check it out. You can find more episodes of Lectionary Kickstart and Tangible on any of the major podcast apps. If you'd like to see the show continue, subscribe for free, share, and leave a review. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordelot. Join us next week here at Lectionary Kickstart when Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Napsker will spark your thoughts for next Sunday.
I have never picked up a sheep.